Shanali, just a question for you. I don't know, are you recording this session at all?
Yeah, I've literally just pressed the record button, so I won't be able to share it with you over email because the file will be too big.
Yeah.
But I can share it with you over WeTransfer, and then you have like 7 days, download the link, and then hopefully you can distribute out. And obviously I'll share the slides with you as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Shall we kick off?
Yep, happy to do so. Yeah. I don't know how many we were expecting, Graham.
We had 32 on the original list.
Okay.
We always get some stragglers.
Okay. But let's conscious of time, haven't we?
Yeah.
We let's push on then. So I just want to do a short introduction, kind of welcome to Shanali and the TSS team. So this is a kind of a cycle of webinars we're doing in conjunction, obviously with TSS team and HMRC as well. So it's another one in the cycle, which is great news. And we're pleased to be able to support and co-host this webinar today. So welcome everybody. I think without stealing Shanali's thunder, then we see this as an update from TSS and the ability to consign goods obviously through and via TSS into some of these custom special procedures as we know them to be. So welcome to everybody and welcome to Shanali and the team, and I'll hand over to you, Shanali.
Great, thanks Clive. So hi everyone, hopefully you'll recognise a few of our faces. You've got obviously myself on, you've got my colleague Magda on as well, and of course Shankar, who I'll allow it to introduce himself in a second. You've also got lots and lots, I can see lots of HMRC colleagues on as well. So what we'd really encourage you to do is obviously remain on mute or video on or off throughout the presentation, but if you have any questions that come up, please just put them straight into the chat function, because we've got a lot of other colleagues on like Doreen and Magda, as I said, who are experts within the customs field, and they're 100% available to answer questions in the background. And then when we get towards the end of the presentation, if there are any more of the more complex queries, we can have Shankar answer them sort of, full front and center for you. So please don't hesitate to add stuff in. As I said, we'll share the slides with you, so don't worry about taking any notes, and share the recording also. I'll just let Shankar introduce himself and then I'll pop up the slides.
Yes, hi, I'm Shankar Singham. I am the Trade and Customs Policy Lead for the TSS and lead on the stakeholder engagement work as well. And my background is sort of 3 decades of international trade customs regulatory experience, including heading up the international trade departments of 2 large global law firms. So with that, we'll ask Shanali to kick off the presentation.
Perfect. So hopefully everybody, we have sort of a similar audience to last time. We took you through sort of like the TSS deep dive. So very much just focusing on how does the TSS process work? What do the declarations look like moving Great Britain to Northern Ireland, and how to really complete supplementary declarations, which has been sort of the biggest focus for a lot of traders in the last few months. The purpose of this session is sort of an introduction to some of the key special procedures that TSS will support by the end of the month. So you have returns good relief, which we already support, which we'll come to in a sec, and then inward processing, outward processing relief, etc. So this is very much a sort of, here's an introduction to these procedures if you're not familiar already, how you can get authorised on them, what's the benefits of them, what are the commercial considerations of them, and then ultimately what we would like to do with the same group is in a couple of weeks do a follow-up to show you how you can use these procedures along with ones like temporary admission, onward supplier relief, sort of, the whole set of them, what they'll look like on the TSS, and especially for this group, entry and exit in and out of a customs warehouse, what the codes you'll need are, and how they'll clear through your TSS declaration. So kind of we're doing it in sort of like a 3-part session, and as I said, we'll of course end on a detailed Q&A where you can ask any questions. It doesn't have to be just related to this material. So I know we covered this last time, but I always find it's worth just kind of doing a quick intro of what the TSS actually is. We are a free-to-use digital service. We're contracted by HMRC to initially help with all of the new requirements that came into effect on the 1st of January this year in line with the Northern Ireland Protocol. What we do is essentially provide a digital way of declaring your goods. So doing all of your customs import declarations for goods moving from Great Britain into Northern Ireland is done via our portal, which runs 24/7, 7 days a week. It's always available. You don't have to do this within working hours, and we constantly integrate with the relevant government systems for you. But kind of one of our biggest focuses on the TSS is to ensure that traders are really, really comfortable with what are the new processes, what are the new requirements, what do they mean to me, to my business, what do I need to now do, and where do I need to do them, what points in the journey, what does TSS do, what does TSS not do. So where we kind of focus a lot on education, you'll see lots of links, hopefully in this presentation and sort of in our material in general, to NICTA, or the NI. The Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy.co.uk. They're our education partner. Everything is publicly available. You don't need any login details. It's all completely free. You have step-by-step guides, data guides, user guides. There are videos, there are demos, there are webinars taking you through, all of the different categories we talk about. Like, do you know how to move live animals? Do you want some SPS guidance? Do you want to know more about controlled goods, how to complete a supplementary declaration? We've done a whole host of webinars on them, things like your tariff options. Do you know what not at risk means? So please do go visit if you haven't already. So big education focus for us. As I said, the entire point of the TSS is ultimately to provide a digital way for you to submit declarations for goods moving Great Britain to Northern Ireland. We do support the entire market, so we have something like 40,000 registered traders, and we really want to ensure that traders of all sizes are really represented here. So helping the smallest of traders, your man with a van, make sure they're able to clear the ports and complete that end-to-end journey, all the way through to some of the largest retailers. And we sort of do everybody on a free-to-use basis as part of our contract. If at any point you need that more human support, we have stood up a huge contact centre of agents. These range from sort of the tier 1s and tier 2s who act kind of like call centre staff. They take all your inbound calls, all the online case queries, and they'll allocate you to the right teams or the right guidance. If a query requires something a bit more complex, need someone with a bit more knowledge to actually walk you through it, that's where our tier 3s come in. And they're very much, like customs consultants, have worked in the business for years and years and years, and really can kind of provide that kind of more hands-on approach, walk you through your query, double check what your customs queries actually are, and make sure you're ultimately able to complete your declaration on the TSS. So that's kind of what the TSS does do. Just a quick note, the TSS, because we do serve the entire market, we're not really a true customs broker in that sense. So we do sort of tend to ask, if you are looking for that much more like personalized approach, you want someone to kind of walk you through what are the most economically advantageous ways for you to trade, especially like with things like warehouses, where should you open them, what are the best routes? We really do urge you to reach out to certain freight forwarders, shippers, etc., because that's really where their experience comes in. And that's really important because, as you can see on that little note on the left there, TSS is ultimately on a temporary contract, and it will exit the market in a few years. So it's worth, we just really want to make sure that there is a huge amount of customs and trade support built up all across the UK in both GB and Northern Ireland. And then a final note, probably not too relevant to this group, but if you are moving things like SPS goods, excise goods, etc., we, within the TSS scope, can't raise those licenses, certificates, permits for you, but we will show you exactly where you need to go to get them, why you need them, and where in the journey you need them, because often you need to link them to your TSS declaration. So just a few happy stats here. I won't spend too long on this, but just glad to see, we've moved something like over 2 million declarations, moving about 1 million consignments now. As you can see, they're split between our ENSs, our SFDs, and we're really starting to see our supplementary declarations move. So it's really kind of great to see that people are engaging with the service, and a lot of this is, as we said, it's all done digitally, it's all done online. And with our sort of contact center really reaching out and helping to push as many of those as we can in the background via outbound calls. One thing I would like to draw your attention to is if you are a trader who's moving high volumes of goods, and often quite similar goods, if you haven't already engaged with our API team, we would urge you to do so, because essentially it just allows the tech teams to obviously for the different systems to talk to each other, means you don't have to do all of the manual declarations, and the API can just push and pull the data straight into our system, straight into CDS. and we had a trader complete something like 20,000 declarations in a single weekend using the API. So if you are interested, please do reach out. Just a few more happy stats for you. Again, I won't spend too long on these. So just a quick reminder of what the process looks like, and then I'll hand over to Shankar. So you have 3 types of declarations within the TSS process. The first one is the ENS, or the Entry Summary Declaration, also known as the Safety and Security Declaration. That's really important because essentially what that allows you is entry into the EU security zone, which Northern Ireland forms part of. This is typically done by the carrier or the haulier, and it involves like a basic description of the goods, the EORI number or the EU identification number of where the goods have come from, where the goods are going, and then the vehicle information itself. So it's a pretty simple data set. And then so your carrier will generally upload that onto the TSS, and we will submit that to the relevant government system, which in this case is ICS Northern Ireland. We then use the exact same data set, so the goods description, the EORIs, and the vehicle details, to then automatically complete the simplified frontier declaration for you. That's really important because what TSS decided early on was to split the customs import declaration into 2 halves, ultimately to make sure that goods could flow into Northern Ireland as quickly as possible, and then give traders a bit more time to kind of complete the second half, which is the supplementary declaration once the goods had arrived. So the simplified frontier declaration does pretty much what it says on the tin. It's a simplified data set. And as I said, we use the exact same data provided by your carrier to automatically complete that for you. And we send it off to CDS, which is the operating customs system in Northern Ireland. So then, as you'll see in a second in the next picture, the final bit is once your goods have moved, you have until the 5th working day of the following month to log back onto TSS. We'll send you a reminder to say, please, can you complete your supplementary declaration? And this is sort of what you think of when you think more of a customs declaration. You know, are you claiming preference? What are your tariff options? What are the commodity codes? And is there any duty liable? As you can see in that final point as well, we have released the functionality to do a full frontier declaration. Now, that's really important because this is where most of the custom special procedures will fall into. So if you do want to claim inward processing, outward processing, temporary admission, etc., it's likely that you will need to fall under a full frontier declaration, which it's the exact same data provided in the SFD and the subdeck, but instead you're going to do it all in a single declaration before the goods move. So it's a full import declaration. And then here's just a visual version of it, which hopefully you've all seen before. So always things to note, you know, are you comfortable with your Inco terms, such as, you know, and TSS's model focuses on the NI buyer being the importer of record. But if you move goods under a term such as delivered duty paid or delivered at place, it might be the GB supplier who's responsible for raising the import declaration and responsible for paying any duty. So it's worth just really being aware of that because that will define who does what on the TSS journey. As I said, your carrier or your haulier, they will provide the information to complete the ENS or the Safety and Security Declaration. We send that off to ICS Northern Ireland. We then use the exact same data set to also complete the Simplified Frontier Declaration for you. We send that off to CDS, which is the customs system. We then get returned 2 clearances called movement reference numbers. I apologise now for all the acronyms. So you get 1 MRN, 1 movement reference for your ENS, 1 movement reference for the first half of your customs deck. We provide that back to your haulier and to yourself via the TSS portal. Your haulier then needs to log on to another government system called GVMS, or the Goods Vehicle Movement System. That essentially is what's going to track the journey across the Irish Sea. And it's really important that they go onto GVMS to attain what's known as a goods movement reference, or it's a barcode called a GMR. And that's when they log on to GVMS, you'll need to put in both of those MRNs, so one for the ENS, one for the SFD, and then GVMS will say, okay, great, you've done your compliance, here's a goods movement reference. And that's really important because you'll need that when you embark on the ferry when you're trying to move to Northern Ireland. And then essentially your goods can clear, and then we will notify you to, pardon me, to complete your subdeck. And then you can see the sort of same version where if you're doing a full frontier, all of that is done before the journey begins. And I'll hand over to Shankar, sorry.
All right. Well, thanks, Shonali. So yeah, just to summarise the whole process for the TSS and how you do it. Obviously, you've got to be registered with the TSS digital platform, you will send us some information in order to populate the entry summary declaration. It's the haulier who typically, well, the haulier has the responsibility to do it. It doesn't mean they have to do it. In fact, many of our traders who want to do the import declaration, they will actually populate the ENS, but the ENS actually generates the SFD, the Simplified Frontier Declaration, and that's what gets you across the boundary. You will then get approval to move, and the declaration is completed through the supplementary declaration. So for the most part, for most of the sort of free circulation type journeys, you're going SFD to subdec. The only exception to that would be if you need to claim return goods relief, which I will come to in a second, in which case you have to use the full frontier declaration, and we had functionality for the full frontier declaration and the return goods relief at the beginning of July. It's when you do the supplementary declaration that you need to think about how if you are liable for a duty payment, how you pay it, what you can do. Now there is a backlog of supplementary declarations that we have, and you've got some dates there. Most of those are passed in terms of actually submitting and completing those supplementary declarations. The normal rule, though, when you do the SFD, is to do the supplementary declaration by the 5th working day of the month following the movement. You have to do it by that date. That doesn't mean you do it on that date, but we will get in touch with traders who have done SFDs, and we will ask them for information regarding their supplementary declaration in time. Now, obviously, with respect to this group, TSS has not yet supported alternate customs procedures, but we will do that from our release 6 at the end of August. And so at that point, traders who have been using alternate customs procedures will be able to basically do supplementary declarations through TSS. If we go to the next slide. So for some traders who have found it quite difficult to do supplementary declarations, we do have some assistance to do that. We have a tier 3 or customs consultant group, and these are people who have at least 7 years customs experience, and they are able to talk to traders who are having difficulty with the supplementary declaration. And there's quite a lot of outbound calling and other methods of solving subdec issues. One of the things, if you're moving goods entirely within the UK customs territory, so in other words, you're a not at risk movement, GBNI, then the supplementary declaration system could be very valuable to you, because what it does is it allows you to use grouping. So you group all your consignments to the highest tariff code. Obviously, if you're moving within the customs territory, there's no tariff that has to be paid. There's no application of any trade agreement or preference or anything else. And therefore, you get all the benefits of the simplification without having to pay the burden or feel the burden of the tariff, of the higher tariff that you would ordinarily have to pay. So the assistant is quite useful for for those kinds of traders. Let me go to the next slide. So just with respect to when you do have to pay a tariff, we're not going to go into huge detail about this now. We have a separate presentation about, for traders who need to think about how to use the different tariff options. But typically, there are 4 sort of primary checks you would do. One is, what is the European Common External Tariff for those for the particular product that you're moving? If it's 0 on an MFN basis, then you're always not at risk for the purposes of the UK trader scheme, or for the purposes of your GBNI movement. You're always not at risk. You'll never have to pay a duty, obviously, because any duty you'd have to pay would be 0. However, that is not going to apply to most things. If there is a tariff, then you need to check whether you can qualify for the UK trader scheme. Now, there are various things that you need to satisfy in order to qualify for the UK trader scheme. You need to have a sufficient visibility into your movements and evidence that your goods are actually staying in Northern Ireland. You need to be selling to consumer-facing facilities and so forth. Now, if you're moving goods in alternate custom procedures, this won't necessarily apply to you, and you'd probably be using those procedures because you're moving goods on that risk basis, and you need the cash flow benefits of the alternate procedure, or not to enter goods into free circulation, or you might be using this in order to avoid the situation where you've got an EU movement into GB, which if it's in free circulation and you then move on to Northern Ireland, you've got a secondary movement and then you'd have to pay a tariff again. So these are reasons why you might use special customs procedures. If you can't qualify for the UK trader scheme, then you need to check whether you've got a preferential, whether you can use the preferential rate of the EU-UK TCA. Now, the difficulty here is rules of origin. The rules of origin of the TCA are relatively restrictive. And this means that there's quite a lot of products where the local content requirements under the EU-UK TCA you do not qualify. And for those products, it's you can't use the preference zero tariff rate of the trade agreement, and you may have to pay a tariff. In which case, again, if you're not able to use the TCA, you're not able to be on the UK trader scheme, you might think about alternate customs procedures. And what I'd say also about the UK trader scheme that would exclude traders is if you're processing in Northern Ireland. So if you're bringing product into Northern Ireland which you're processing, then you're not going to be able to qualify for the UK trader scheme, with some limited exceptions. So if you're a very small trader and you're trading less than £500,000 a year, sorry, if you can go back to the previous slide.
Sorry, Shanka, I just think I have that processor one, so I wasn't sure if you just wanted it up in the background.
I'll come back. I'll come back
Okay.
to that. Just highlight it. If you can go back to thanks. If you're a processor, then there are exceptions, limited exceptions. The very small processor and certain things like healthcare and food and construction and so on. If you don't qualify for any of these things, and if you are very small, and you're typically bringing in quite a limited amount of goods, then you can use the waiver, which is the de minimis state aid amount. Now that is 200,000 euro for 3 fiscal years, so it's not a huge amount of duty that would be covered, and this really only applies if you're a small trader. But if you are a very small trader and you're in that category, our recommendation to you is not to go through the complexity of understanding whether you satisfy rules of origin for the purpose of the trade agreement, but to go straight, go ahead and use the waiver where you can. So go to the next slide. So just to emphasize, if you think you qualify for the UK trader scheme, then absolutely you need to be authorized. You need to apply to HMRC. We've got the links there that you can use. And the principal thing is you've got to demonstrate, you've got to show your control so that you're not at risk of moving goods to the EU, i.e. Ireland, and you've got to be selling to final consumers. Located in Northern Ireland or elsewhere in the UK customs territory. There was a provisional authorization process. Maybe you've been provisionally authorized. If you haven't, then it's a full application process you need to go through. So if we go to the next slide. And the criteria that you need to meet to continue on that, that there is a permanent establishment criteria that has been temporarily eased. So there's a temporary easement that is due to expire at the end of October, so that you do not have to have a permanent establishment in Northern Ireland, and it's sufficient. And this would apply to traders who are trading on DDP terms. Such that they're doing the import declaration, but they don't necessarily have a permanent establishment in Northern Ireland. And so you can do that. And our recommendation to traders is even though that easement is scheduled to expire at the end of October, there is no retroactive application of duties. So even if you lose the UK trader scheme at that time, you should still be on it if you can be on it, because it will prevent you from having to pay duties up to this point. You've obviously got to have no history of customs violations and so on, and you've got to have the record keeping that enables you to demonstrate your visibility into those movements. What I will say about the temporary easement is this is sort of bound up in the command paper and the UK's proposal to the European Union. And part of that proposal is a standstill, i.e. all the easements that are currently in place, including the supermarket easement, the StanMe, the fast parcel operator easement, and this temporary easement on the permanent business requirement of the UK trader scheme. All of these are the UK government's proposal is to put these on pause pending the negotiation, which is not to crystal ball gaze and tell you where that negotiation is going to go. Certainly, it's an additional reason why you might want to do this anyway, in the hope that the UK will prevail in its request. If you go to the next slide, please. So in order to declare goods not at risk, you've obviously got to be authorised under the trader scheme. You've got to maintain that evidence that we talked about in terms of sales to consumers, or business use in Northern Ireland. And if you can't provide evidence on this, then your goods can't be not at risk, and they will be at risk, and you could be liable for a duty. Go to the next slide. And as I mentioned before, there are certain exceptions to that general rule that processing takes you out of the not at risk category, or the UK eligibility for the UK trader scheme. There's that small processor exception if you're under £500,000, and then there are approved sectors like food, construction, healthcare, certain not-for-profit activities, and final use of animal feed on premises in Northern Ireland by the importer. Now, I'll just make a parenthetical note that in terms of what is processing, the Northern Ireland Protocol has a very specific and very, very broad definition of processing that is actually broader than the typical customs view of processing. You should, if you're doing anything basically to the good, then you're likely to be in the processing category. We go to the next slide. There is a specific rules on apportionment, so that if you are bringing goods into Northern Ireland and you know that some of them stay in Northern Ireland, some of them are at risk of going into Ireland, and provided that sort of percentage of goods staying in Northern Ireland versus goods going into Ireland stays at roughly the same. You've got a historic number of years where the patterns don't really change. What the government's looking for is a historic pattern which is pretty stable, which doesn't really move around. And if that's true, then you can use apportionment, so you can be on the UK trader scheme in respect of the goods that stay in Northern Ireland, and only in respect of those goods. But you need to apply for that to HMRC. And what you would do is, if this applies to you, what you would do is in your UK trader scheme application, you would say that you intend to use apportionment, and this is how you intend to use it, and this is your historical record of the percentages of goods back and forth. So that's an important element. We go to the next slide. And we'll make these slides available to you, so don't worry if we are going through them quite quickly. I want to go through them relatively quickly so we can get to the special customs procedure part, which I'm sure you're more interested in. So to use apportionment, these are the requirements, the critical one there is the stability of those supply chains, that it doesn't move around a lot in terms of percentage. And if we go to the next slide. And if you can't use this, then there's a waiver category for very, very small traders, or at least people who are bringing in a relatively small amount of trade. Now, if you assume a 4% tariff for industrial goods at 200,000 over 3 fiscal years, you're probably in the ballpark of less than £1.5 million per year of imports. So if you're under that and it's sort of basic industrial goods, then you could be eligible for the waiver. We've got a lot of links on the slide that you can look at. If you are if you're trading in goods that are things like food, textiles, things that typically attract very high tariffs, then that import amount comes down a significant amount and makes the waiver less useful. And of course, you also have to include, this is a ceiling, you have to include any other state aids that you receive from the government in this, and that'll lower your headroom in terms of the ceiling. If we go to the next slide, please. So the main thing I want to stress with this slide is when it comes time to do the supplementary declaration, it's important that you have a strategy in mind and a methodology that you would use. Don't just start filling in boxes. It's really important to think, well, what is the right thing for me to do? If you're going in, so the two codes on the header, the AI codes on the header are NI-DOM, NI-IMP. For people using free circulation, it's NI-DOM. Now, for the special customs procedures that we're going to talk about, it's NI-IMP, and that has to go onto the header. There is then a separate code that needs to go onto the declaration, and it's either NI-REM for goods not at risk, it's NI-AID for the waiver. And we've got a link there that shows you the information that you need. And there may be additional things that you have to do on the supplementary declaration with respect to goods that are subject to other government licenses and controls. And go to the next slide. There are some new codes that are being used, and we put them up there. The NI-HIS, the trader declares that the goods are not at risk, and then you've got the historic records, so that picks up the apportionment provisions. And then you've got NI-QUO and NI-DOM. So this is where you're importing GBNI that are subject to an EU quota where you're claiming duty relief. You're within quota, and no duty will be charged in that case. Now that covers things like steel movements, and some other trade where there is a trade remedy in application. And then if you're using NI-QUO and NI-IMP, that's where you're using the quota, but you're using a special procedure. And then the final one there, the good doesn't meet the NIP conditions, but HMRC have nevertheless authorized or instructed the trader that they can be de-risked for the purpose of tariffs, and you can override the tariff requirement. So, that if the UK, for example, were to get its proposal in the command paper, that's the code that you would be using. I'll skip over the rest of this because I think I'm conscious of time, and we do need to get into the. We really need to get into the special procedures. We've talked about this slide already, and there's some videos and links there to the various declarations information. So return goods relief. Now this is important for people who are doing those secondary movements, for example. Now typically return goods relief is that special procedure, and we do support it as of the 4th of July gone. You don't need to pay duty on goods that are being re-imported into the UK that have previously been exported. They have to be in free circulation in the UK when they were exported. There's a time limit, there's a period in which you've got to do this within 3 years of the export, and it can be claimed only during the import process. And so the typical goods that could be claimed are goods exported from the UK as free circulation goods, goods exported from the UK that follow inward processing, or they're exported under temporary admission, and goods declared for outward processing that are unprocessed and in the same state of the original export. So that's the eligibility criteria. If we go to the next slide. So typically what, who's likely to use this? If you've got, the return, as in the name, if you've got a return, then obviously you can use it. But the category that we think we're going to see more need for this is if you lose preferential treatment upon export from the EU and entry into free circulation in GB, and then you're moving the product without processing directly into Northern Ireland, where you would actually have to pay a tariff. And if you're not subject to UKTS, so therefore you're moving it GB to NI, but you can't claim that it's a movement within the UK customs territory, then this short of using alternate customs procedures is something that you can use in order not to pay the tariff. If we go to the next slide, please. We will be updating guidance, or rather the government will be upgrading its RGR guidance shortly. And the key things you need to think about when you're looking at RGR is you've got to have evidence of the import. So for example, if you look at that example of EU to GB to Northern Ireland, you have to have evidence of the import from EU to GB. You've got to have evidence of the country of origin. And you've got to be able to show the RGR route that you're applying for, and we've got a link there to some guidance. And as I say, it is being updated, and there is information that we're providing on RGR. If you go to the next slide. So inward processing relief. Just wanted to cover off what inward processing relief, what traders need, what we're saying to traders they need to consider it for using inward processing relief. Obviously, it's a duty suspension procedure, and it gives you that benefit in terms of your import duty and your import VAT, which are suspended. If the trader is authorized to use inward processing to process or repair goods, they don't need to pay the customs duty and the import VAT on the goods that import from outside of GB and then re-export from GB. If the trader keeps their goods in GB, then you can pay a reduced amount of duty and import VAT. If the duty rate of the imported components is lower than the duty rate of the imported goods. So in those areas, it is advantageous. We go to the next slide. We will be supporting inward processing from the end of August, and we are talking to traders right now about it because we think that there is probably a larger category of traders who will need to use these sorts of process than would normally occur in a sort of normal customs territory because of the very specific rules of the trade agreement with regard to rules of origin, for example, and also because of the specific rules of the Northern Ireland Protocol. So we think that the business case evaluation by the trader would typically take a week. The preparation of record keeping requirements would probably take another week. And then the application process, gathering the data for that is we've sort of assumed another week on top of that, and then the application process is liable to be a 4 to 6 week process. If you go to the next slide. So what are the commercial considerations? Again, this is something we're telling traders. Ultimately, it's a commercial decision for you, and the trader needs to understand, what is the tariff rate? Because obviously, the higher the tariff rate, the more significant the benefits that IP can actually bring. So certain things like pharmaceutical products and other things where the tariff rate is 0, it's not especially beneficial. But if you're talking about fabrics, textiles, etc., it can be significantly beneficial. And also you have an additional issue with some products that are subject to GSP that are coming in from other countries that are GSP beneficiaries. That again, if you enter free circulation in GB and then move to Northern Ireland without any process, you're going to lose the GSP, the preference rate, and you could be subject then to a very high tariff. So that's a category of people who may have to do this. So you have to make an assessment of what your savings would be, and then you have to think about the investment you've got to put in terms of knowledge, systems and processes and all sorts of other things that you need to do in order to do this. It's not a straightforward exercise, as you all know, and traders need to make sure that they have the relevant record keeping and so on. And if you look at the next slide, please. So these are the factors that we're asking traders to think about. You know, what is the duty spend each month? How many import movements do they have? What are their Inco terms? Are they on DDP terms, etc.? Where does the product originate from? What are the tariff codes? Do you have IT systems? You know, as I said, I think a lot of traders will need to use these kinds of things who you wouldn't typically see using special customs procedures. They may not have IT systems to support this sort of thing. Do they have personnel that understand customs? Or could somebody be trained? If we go to the next slide. And so if you're going to use this, then you have to submit an information sheet by accessing the EU Customs Trader portal. You need to apply to HMRC to that email address first, and these are typically name, email address, address of the Northern Ireland operation, EORI number, and so on. And you will get an email within 5 days which links you to the EU Customs Trader portal, and you can then fill in the application. And we go to the next slide. So who can apply? Sole traders, partnerships, corporate bodies, any of the above. And what you need to do is you need to know what you're going to do with the goods, where is the processing going to be carried out, what goods will be put to authorized use, and that is a defined term that I'll talk about. How long will it take you to process? There's a time limit. There's a period in which you have to, throughput period in which you have to process the goods. What is the yield for each of the components needed to process the finished product, and then tariff codes and origin and so on. If we go to the next slide. And from the 1st of January of this year, there was an application form required for GB and a separate form for Northern Ireland. It can take some weeks to get authorized, and there are audit requirements that we have linked to there, and there's a link again on the NICTA web. Well, there's the government guidance there, but we also have information on this on our NICTA website. And if you go to the next slide, please. So no freight forwarders, fast parcel operators, customs agents wouldn't be applying for this. It's obviously at the trader level. If we go to the next slide. And benefits, obviously, suspension of import VAT, suspension of import duty. There are big cash flow benefits potentially, and no duty payable on items that are scrapped or exported. So significant benefits there. And the next slide. And this is just an example of, that illustrates the point about, you've got your glass bottle there, your dispenser. You've got the different components, the glass bottle, the plastic cap, the plastic pump. They all have different duty rates. The duty rate for the cap and the pump are 6%. The duty rate for the bottle is 0. Under IP, the duty is based on the processed finished goods duty rate, which is 0 in this case. And you can apply the duty rate of the finished goods to the imported components. So you're going to be saving that 6% when the goods are ultimately exported. And if we go to the next slide. There's relief from the suspended export duty. So suppose you have, this example that we've got in there, an exhaust pipe imported into GB from the EU that goes into the manufacture of a car. The import duty is suspended. The exhaust pipe attracts a 4% import duty, or would do under UK global tariff schedule. Now the exhaust pipe is processed into the car, it's incorporated into the car. Import duty remains suspended. The car is then exported to the EU, and the import duty liability for the exhaust pipe is discharged by the export. When you create the export declaration in GB, and so you therefore save that 4% import duty. So again, not another benefit of IP. And if we go to the next slide, please. So other considerations, you've got to carry out the processing within the throughput period, which is a predetermined timescale. And if you don't do it within that predetermined period, then there are going to be fines, potential removal of your authorization, and you could have other penalties and other problems as a result of non-compliance. So you do have to have a good trail, audit trail, and ERP system is usually the best thing, but you can do it with a Excel spreadsheet, but you need to have staff who are capable of doing this, because the cost of getting it wrong can be quite high. And if we go to the next slide. And timescales, the declared processed goods have to be exported, not just shipped, and you need, within the right timescale, proof of export is required. And there's got to be a link established between the original customs entry number for the components, the date and time the goods were imported, and the date and time that the processed goods were dispatched. And this has all got to be completed within the timescale that's given to you on your IP authorization. If we go to the next slide, please. And those authorization requirements, you'll need an individual or a comprehensive guarantee. You need to know how you're going to value your goods, the goods at import, the final product valuation. You need to know how you're going to discharge, how you're going to use a bill of discharge. You need to know the data that you need. The rate of yield can be challenging for some smaller traders. You need to know the IP economic code, the customer's CPC codes, the customer's procedure codes, and you need to have very good record keeping. If we go to the next slide. And so just on record keeping, these are the kinds of things you need to be able to prove. When were they imported? When were the goods imported? What was the quantity? What's the import declaration entry? How did the processing take place? On what were the goods used? What was the quantity used? When have they been exported? You need proof of exportation with an export entry and date. So if we go to the next slide, this is not easy for traders to do, all of this needs to go onto your IP log, and we've got an example of an IP log in the next slide. I think, yeah. So don't have to. I'm not assuming people will be reading this, but these are the kinds of things that you have to have in your IP log. And you can see that it's a fairly it's a fairly complex series of things you have to keep your records on. And the next slide has the final sort of things that you need to have. So again, this is not a straightforward exercise that any small trader is going to be able to quickly do because they have a problem that's given rise to a tariff because of the particular intersection between the Northern Ireland Protocol and the UK-EU TCA rules of origin and so on. You're still going to have quite a lot of support to be able to do this, and you need to have a really good reason to do this, which is based on the tariff that you would be saving. So if we go into the next slide, I think, yeah. So we are rolling this presentation out, and we are having discussions with traders now so that they can use this time period to the end of August, which was 9 weeks when we started doing this presentation, but obviously is much less than that now. And that's the kind of conversation that we're seeking to have with traders so that they can utilize this if they need to. Now, there's two categories of trader we're talking to. Obviously, we're talking to people who already do this, and they need to simply know how the TSS will support their ongoing operations. Those people don't need, massive the same sort of timeline that the others do. And then there is a category of people who may never have used anything like this, but for whom it is actually quite important that they have some mechanism that they can use to offset that otherwise very large tariff they might have to pay, and that is going to be a challenging group of people because of the complexity of the process. And we have our tier 3 consultants who are very happy to spend lots of time with people. So if people are asking questions of you about this, then please send them through to us and we can help educate them about what they need to do. If we go to the next slide, I think that is, and then we've got some useful links there, gov.uk guidance on all of these things that can be obviously shared. I think we're now at the Q&A period. I don't know if people have been putting questions in the chat. We certainly have our tier 3 customs consultants on there who can answer those questions. But if they haven't been answered, or if there are other questions that you want to ask, I mean, now is the time to do so.
Graham, has anybody raised any questions through the chat?
Nothing so far, but if you have got any questions, you can either raise your hand or speak now, or just put it in the chat box.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ken Cummings here. How is everyone this afternoon?
Good, Ken. Yes, very well. Yourself?
Yes, fine, thank you. A very quick question, and it's one that's obviously on everyone's mind at this moment in time. The TSS service is obviously providing a great service at this moment in time, and with enhancements that are coming along to meet the regulatory requirements, it's even more beneficial, and people are getting that great benefit from it. Obviously, the thing that is sitting at the back of people's minds is that this is a limited time offer only, with TSS being supported by the government. Is there any indication of what will happen after that session as the contract's expired, or are we still in a sort of area of uncertainty as how that's going to progress?
Right. So I mean, that's a very good question, and obviously fully understand why people are asking those questions. I'm somewhat limited in what I can say, as you will probably expect. But the original TSS was scheduled to be, a year plus a year of extension. So sort of 2 years, and then we'll see. What I will say is that we are still, as I mentioned, we're still in the middle of doing releases. So we haven't reached the kind of steady state yet. So we've got release 6 coming out at the end of August. We've got release 7 coming out at the beginning of October. There may be further things that happen. The situation is also complicated by the command paper and the negotiation with the EU with respect to the Northern Ireland Protocol itself. And so it's quite a uncertain time, and you obviously wouldn't really necessarily want to shut down a program in the middle of uncertainty. So our plan is to we were very conscious at the beginning that we did not want to essentially knock out customs intermediaries and agents from the market. In fact, we want to do the reverse. We want to actually develop them and strengthen them, and we do a lot of training. And in fact, what we have basically done is stood up a customs university in Northern Ireland to train people on the European rules. And just to point that out, the rate of downloads of the Northern Ireland Customs Trade Academy is about the same kind of level as the Open University across all its courses. So that gives you a sense of what the scale of this thing is. So a lot of that is designed to sort of make sure people are educated for when TSS is no longer in the market. But there will be, I suppose what I can say is that there will be a phased process. There won't be a sudden, suddenly it's switched off and everyone was left to fend for themselves. I mean, you will know how that will go. Apologies if I can't give you more clarity than that, but that's I mean, we're all dealing with a very uncertain environment, and that's probably the best I can do under the circumstances.
I can appreciate, obviously, your answers is where it is and where we're going, etc. Just the rationale, as you can imagine, dealing with multiple clients moving goods across the border as they do. The TSS service has been a fantastic opportunity for them. One, as a learning opportunity to understand what those regimes entail, because it's probably something they've never had to do previously. It's opened the market from there. And of course, obviously, because of the benefit, it's free. As any trader will tell you, that's a massive benefit. I think the concern is that they have, that we've tried to sort of convey to them, but in a positive manner, is that, you know, TSS is a limited shelf life. We don't know where it's going to go in the forum and how it's going to progress based on the current political climate. Appreciate that totally, but they may well have to consider at some point that they might have to look for alternatives in respects of other support by freight forwards or shipping agents, etc. And those fields are quite narrow. And I think there's that sort of respect of the fact that they want to hold on to TSS as long as they possibly can, but as you said, don't want to be left in the lurch at the minute when somebody says, oh, we're going to have to pull the plug, and find that there are limited resources in order to be able to fill that gap. Based on the numbers that you already presented, there's an awful lot of traffic going through there, and currently nobody could be able to fill that gap.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, that there isn't, the gap isn't being filled. I mean, we are monitoring agents and intermediaries, and we are sort of taking a look at whether we think that the intermediary market is sort of stepping up, and you know, partly because the rules are sort of in flux a little bit at the moment. We're not really seeing that. I think you're right that there isn't really that take up. But we are committed, you know, to as long as HMRC requires us to be there, we are absolutely committed to continuing to support the trader community. And just on the point, you know, given the group we're talking to here, I think, and this isn't just Northern Ireland, this is actually probably for the whole of the UK. I think there is going to be much more of a requirement for various special procedures to deal with the fact that we got a very intense trade boundary with the EU, or between GB and NI. And so you are probably going to see more things like special processes, IP, OP, etc., and you're probably going to see more transit use than you would otherwise have. And those are complex, and traders need some time to understand them. The market needs time to process them, and so I think the education component that we do there is really critical.
Thank you very much for that. That's fine. Thank you. That's great.
Graham, just a question from me to Shankar, if I may. You just touched on, you know, obviously the intermediary and the trader. Do you know, I guess you do know, just how many traders are using TSS and how many intermediaries are using TSS?
It's not easy for us to say exactly how many intermediaries are using TSS, because right now, and we are planning to have this functionality in release 7, where agents and intermediaries will be able to have their own accounts on TSS, and then we will know exactly, you know, who they are. So right now there are intermediaries that are doing things on behalf of their customers, but they can't have their own account, so they have to have the customer has to essentially put them on their account, and all the emails that go back and forth from TSS to the person who's doing the declaration go to the trader, not the agent. And I know that's a cumbersome process, and I know they've said that they don't like that, which is why we are introducing this new functionality in release 7. But in terms of the number of traders, we have 40,000 plus traders who are registered on TSS. Of that group, not all of that group are doing declarations. I mean, it's a much smaller percentage that are doing declarations. What I can say is, of that group, there's probably about somewhere between 20%, or maybe it's around 20%, who aren't really interacting with our system significant. I mean, they're not doing their supplementary declarations, which is our way of telling how they are interacting with us. So the way our system works, as we sort of said at the beginning of the presentation, is that traders will, the haulier will quite often do the entry summary declaration, and that will populate the SFD. So the trader themselves, the importer, may not see any of this. The goods will simply go across the frontier. They have no idea how. And then they will get an email from us saying, now you've got to do your supplementary declaration. And that's literally sometimes, for some cases, that's the first time they hear of this process. So there's quite a number of people in that category. And we are making it easier for the kind of trader or importer who wants to control their import declaration process by separating the ENS from the SFD so that you can do your import declaration process entirely. But there's a very long tail of small traders here, and creating a system where the haulier takes the load at the frontier was, I think, very important for us to do, so that we wouldn't have truck stuck at port, basically, and we were successful in not having that. That hasn't been, everyone feared that would be the headline, but that wasn't the headline. But bear in mind, there's still an FPO easement. You still have the stand me. You still have the supermarket easement. You still have the authorized trader easement. When those eventually go, you're going to get a whole category of new people on this, and that goes to the first question: is when does TSS get switched off? Well, I mean, we haven't even seen a whole category of traders who, frankly, in Northern Ireland are bringing stuff in under the FPO easement, and they don't have to do anything at all. Yeah. So for them, it's almost as if Brexit hasn't happened. Well, they'll come on stream, and then we'll have all of these issues again.
Yeah. No, I share Ken's view, actually, that TSS has stepped into a space. And when it steps out of that space, the genuine concern that the intermediary market won't have the capacity to step into that space. If that makes sense, Shanker. Yeah. And I think that's the real risk, I think, going forward.
I agree. No, we totally agree. We totally agree with you on that. It's got to be very, very carefully handled.
Yeah. And as you've outlined today, some of these special procedures, and we talk about special procedures, are really complex.
Yes.
So I have to say, traders and small traders getting to understand the requirements around, but that's not going to happen. Reality, they're not going to be able to grasp that, and that's no detriment, disrespect to them in any shape or form, because customs special procedures can be really complex, as you've outlined, and that's also a genuine concern as well. Yeah. I think we have is that education absolutely is critical to that, but is that going to happen in the time frame between now and when kind of TSS steps out of the space?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, and we'll just have to, we'll unfortunately, you've got in this whole process lots of unknown unknowns that relate to the protocol itself.
Yeah,
and obviously we're right in the middle of that, right now. So we'll just have to see. But I think the one thing you can say going forward, and this is a message I think that your members and so on need to sort of push out there, and we would be interested in talking to you about how we can sort of jointly push some of these messages out there. There's going to be more use of these procedures, in the long run for the UK, and the question is how do we skill up people so that they can take advantage of them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we really haven't mentioned today customs warehousing, I think we've seen an uptake in that significantly since Brexit, and I think that won't stop. So yeah, I think there's a space there and a gap there in knowledge that needs to be addressed, definitely.
Yeah, and warehousing and things like onward supply and all of these things, excise, this all will come in release 6 at the end of August as well. So we will support all of those.
Okay. Good. Okay, that's it from me, Graham.
All right, excellent. There's no other questions on the chat or anything, but has anyone else got anything to ask before we close?
I think just from me, Graham, again, as Shanker mentioned earlier, that these slides will be available. So I think, given that this is quite a complex subject that we've been talking about, and Shanker's been outlaying or overviewing, I think people can take those slides away, have a look at those, and then come back, say via yourself with any questions that we can then we can pass on to you, Shanker, and your team.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Yeah, because I think to absorb what's been said today is really difficult. So I think if we give the opportunity, say, people to take the slides, absorb those, and then come back with questions, if they could filter those through you, Graham, that'd be great. Yeah,
no problem at all.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Good.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, everybody. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please share them, and we will answer them.
Great. Well, thanks for your time, Shankar, and the team. Thank you very much, and Shanali. And thanks for everybody for attending. Hopefully you found that really useful. I certainly did. So yeah, and any questions, as we say, then please filter back through Graham, and we'll see you on the next webinar. So have a great afternoon and a great weekend, everybody.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.